I'm going to talk to you today about the Los Angeles Food Policy Council, discuss what the goals are, some of our key priorities, and I'll also take a step back and talk a little bit about the state of our current food system. We refer to the 10 counties in Southern California as our Los Angeles Regional Food Shed. So I'll paint a little bit of a picture about that. Detail a few we are running 2 programs, talk about some of the policy priorities and initiatives that we have been advancing through our working groups, and also talk about a couple of ways for students like you to get involved in the work that we're doing. And just before I start, has anyone ever attended one of our network meetings? Oh, fantastic. And has anyone ever heard of the LA Food Policy Council? Excellent. And just by way of background, we're one of 270 food policy councils across North America. And when I started working on this initiative about 5 years ago in 2009, there were 170 food policy councils. So the Food Policy Council model has been around since I think the mid-70s, but just in the last maybe 10 years, as food system issues have generated more and more attention, this model has become very popular. The models are, there's no 2 food policy councils are alike. They're very unique to the area, but I think when we have looked at commonalities across food policy councils across the country, one of the key features is that the focus is on bringing diverse stakeholders together to look at their local food system, identify what the issues are, and think about new solutions to solving some of these very old, entrenched problems. So the mission of the Food Policy Council is that we are a collective impact initiative working to make Southern California a good food region for all Angelenos. And we define good food as food that's healthy, affordable, fair, and sustainable. Our goals are to develop a thriving good food economy for all participants in the food chain, strengthen agricultural and environmental stewardship, and create a space where we're really fostering and nurturing individuals and better health and well-being for all residents. So we use this concept of collective impact because the theory behind it is that when we're talking about big social problems, you can't address any of this in isolation. Typically, food policy has been approached in silos, so there are people working on issues like food access or food labor, but we're talking about a big system that has many of the same root causes. So if we want to actually create large-scale change, we need to bring all the stakeholders together who have a stake in the game and to define shared goals and vision and create a work plan that moves us in the same direction. So the Food Policy Council serves as the backbone organization in terms of helping to coordinate these efforts. So like I said, we, like all food policy councils, we bring stakeholders together from across sectors, issue areas, socioeconomic communities, and our mantra is to catalyze, coordinate, and connect. So we catalyze new initiatives that haven't been done before and think of things in sort of new ways, a little bit more holistically than traditionally. We build connections with new partners, and we help to strengthen existing connections from partners and facilitate and coordinate food system change. So, there are hundreds of organizations in Los Angeles that are working in food system change, and they're incredibly effective. Some of the best organizations in the country are based here. So if you ever want to get involved, Los Angeles is really the place to do it. So what we try not to duplicate any work that's already being done. Our purpose is really to kind of jumpstart things that haven't been done before. So the way that we're structured is We have a staff of about 6, 5 full-time, 1 part-time staff. And then we have a leadership board of 40 members. And these board members were strategically selected. They are, experts in their field, really seen as leaders. And they carefully represent different issue areas, different sectors. So we have for example, head of food services for Los Angeles Unified School District represented on the board. We have the head of chronic disease and injury prevention at LA County Department of Public Health. But then we also have representatives from some very leading nonprofits that are focused on equity and food access. And we have farmers and distributors, and try to get a balanced representation between public sector, private sector, nonprofit. And so the leadership board and the staff really helped to create strategic direction for our working groups, which I think is really where the magic happens for our work. So we have 6 working groups at this point in time, and that constantly changes depending on what issues are bubbling up. But the working groups are an expanded stakeholder network, so they're really open to anyone who wants to engage in a regular way and put the work in around particular topic areas. So I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of each working group, but we have working groups focused on street food vending, urban agriculture, sustainable seafood, farmers markets, healthy food retail, and good food economy. And then finally we have this other ring, our LAFPC network, which is an even more expanded network of about 1,000 people who either come to our regular networking meetings or participate in some way through volunteer activities, or just have been part of our work over the last several years. And then we also participate in the California Food Policy Council, which is a relatively new concept. It's I think it's the only statewide food policy council that is a council of local councils. So there are 30 food policy councils across California. And this California Food Policy Council brings all of those local councils together to help identify best practices, so each local council doesn't spend a lot of time reinventing the wheel. We can learn from one another, figure out who's doing what, and take those lessons learned and run with it. And then also the real function is to help accelerate food system change at the state level through policy work. So a little bit about our history. Food Policy Council actually started as a task force that was created by Mayor Villaraigosa in 2009. And this task force was asked to create a food policy framework for the city of Los Angeles and to look into whether a Food Policy Council was an appropriate body for LA and if that could really help to address some of the big issues that the region is facing. So the task force met for about 10 months and ultimately came up with the recommendation that, yes, in fact, they thought a Food Policy Council would be very effective for Los Angeles. And it also came up with a framework that included 55 recommendations focused at the city and the county level. And that was the Good Food for All agenda. So the Food Policy Council actually formed in 2011, and we've been meeting ever since. Shortly after the Food Policy Council was formed, Mayor Villaraigosa appointed Paula Daniels, who's the founder of the Food Policy Council. She was at that point a Public Works Commissioner for the City of Los Angeles. He appointed her as his food policy, senior advisor on food policy. And that was about 2 years ago, and at that time, this concept of a senior advisor on food policy was very new. Cities like New York and Boston, I'm drawing a blank on a few of the other cities, but this is a fairly recent innovation in that mayors are starting to look at issues like food policy similarly to how they started to look at sustainability and hiring, sustainability directors or sustainability czars. Now there's this growing trend across cities to have someone focused on food policy in the mayor's office. So obviously this past summer there was a change in mayoral administration. Mayor Garcetti, everyone was very happy to see him come in. And I think the interesting thing about the Food Policy Council is that we're located at City Hall, but we're actually an independent nonprofit. We're fiscally sponsored by an organization called Community Partners. So we have the benefit of being located and connected to the city, but we also have the benefit of being outside of the city when we need to. So we help to bridge between City Hall and also the nonprofit advocacy community. So we have maintained a presence in City Hall. I think that was, the strongest demonstration of the mayor's support for food policy work was by allowing us to remain in the City Hall building. We have a very close working relationship with the mayor as well as several city council members. And so that's something that I think we wanted to outlive any mayoral administration. We wanted to outlive any city councils. So now we actually had another transition with our own board. Paula Daniels was the chair for about 3 years, and now we recently elected Michael Flood, who's the CEO of the LA Regional Food Bank, as the chair of the board, and Joanne Lowe, who's executive director of the Food Chain Workers Alliance, as our vice chair. So this is the Good Food for All agenda that I mentioned a few moments ago. A few of our key initiatives, they really evolved from the Good Food for All agenda, but as we've gotten a little bit more focused through our working groups, we've tweaked the strategic priorities a bit. So we're still focused on increasing equitable access to good food in all communities. We have a healthy neighborhood market network and community market conversion program that we operate. Build market demand for good food. I'll talk to you in a moment about our Good Food Purchasing Pledge, which is a procurement policy for major institutions. We're very focused and committed to continuing to grow our network of stakeholders, building infrastructure for a good food system that really relates to a lot of the policy work that we're doing, and building a sustainable, collaborative, and inclusive organization. So, what is Los Angeles' food story? In 2013, at the end of the year, we published this report, and it's the Los Angeles Food System Snapshot. And what it is a collection of about 100 indicators across 9 different issue areas, just to help establish a baseline for where we are at in terms of, regional food shed, environmental sustainability, equity, etc. Just so that as a collective impact initiative, as we're working together around common goals, we can track what type of impact we're having regionally. So as many of you know, our food system works very well for many of us, but it fails many more. And our food system is set up so we can produce as much food as cheaply as we can, but that's led to some pretty serious consequences for our environment, for social equity, local economies, and the environment. So I just wanted to run through a few of these numbers just quickly. So this is our food shed here, 10 counties in the region. We produce we're the most productive agricultural region in the country, if not the nation. We produce many of the, I think about $16 billion in fruits, nuts, and vegetables. But most of our food is coming from a very small number of, so while we have a very large number of farms, most of that food is coming from a small number of those farms. So I think in tree fruits and nuts, about 4% of our farms account for about 70% of the tree fruit and net revenue. And this is problematic not just from, this is problematic because it drains the local economy as the food system becomes more consolidated. Less small and mid-sized farmers have less access to market. Many of them are selling off their land. And that's problematic not just from a local economy standpoint, but also in terms of sprawl. And we lose about 40,000 acres in California every year, prime agricultural lands, to development. So in terms of environmental sustainability, the food system has a pretty serious impact on the environment. We use about 80%, California agriculture uses about 80% of the state's water, and it's also a leader in greenhouse gas emissions, air and water pollution. So pollution from agricultural fertilizers and pesticides and animal waste is actually the leading cause of groundwater contamination in the state and has left many communities without a safe supply of drinking water in the Central Valley areas. Food is also the largest single source of waste in California. Here you can see that in Los Angeles, the city of LA, our food scraps account for about 28% of our food waste stream. Excuse me, antibiotics are also a huge issue. The use of antibiotics for livestock has quadrupled in the last few decades. So now about 70% of antibiotics used, over 70% of antibiotics used in the country are going towards livestock, and that can lead to antibiotic-resistant bacteria in humans. So the food system is a huge economic engine in this state, and it accounts for about 1 in every 7.5 jobs here in our food shed. Unfortunately, many of those jobs are pretty low paying and lack any type of career advancement. Because of these low wages, we've found that food system workers have higher rates of food insecurity and are using public benefits at higher rates than the general workforce. Pesticide drift and contamination is also a huge issue in farm worker communities, and the list goes on and on. Then finally, here in Los Angeles, while we have the most productive food shed in the nation, we have a huge hunger problem epidemic in Los Angeles. And actually, the USDA official has, a woman named Lisa Pino came to Los Angeles and called Los Angeles the epicenter of hunger. About 1 in 10 families face food insecurity. We lose, I think, less than 55% of county residents who are actually eligible for food stamps receive the benefit. And so we lose out on about $1 billion in federal dollars coming into the area each year. And many of the families who face food insecurity are also the ones suffering from obesity. We have a huge obesity epidemic that mirrors the rest of the country. And we find that many of these, the highest rates of food insecurity and obesity are impacting low-income communities of color. So in South LA, we have obesity, poverty, and diabetes rates that are 3 times the rest of the county. And we also, the studies have found that there are 3 times as many grocery stores in West LA. And there are twice as many convenience stores in South LA. So there's an overabundance of unhealthy foods in some of the poorest communities and a lack of healthy food options. And it's a very complicated issue, but it really mirrors poverty trends. So here in LA, this is a pretty interesting map. And this was created by someone based in the geography department at Berkeley. But this is a map of the organizations who are working to address many of those big issues that I just ran through. You can see here that there are organizations, each box here represents one organization that is connected in the Food Policy Council network in some way. So it cuts across public sector, private sector, nonprofit. But you can see that, there are many organizations working in different forms of economic development, or this includes food distribution, food hubs, labor and worker justice, urban agriculture is kind of one bucket, food system and land use, environmental and sustainability, good food access. So this was just a way of trying to show connections across the different issue areas. You can see the circles with the colors connect in some ways to the different issue areas. So it's just supposed to show intersection and the scale of number of organizations working to make things better. So we have two programs that we're running, and both of these programs were really brainchildren of two of our working groups. And the working groups really developed the concepts and the framework, and then once either the policy was adopted or the model was developed, then there was need for more staff support to actually run things. So the first is our Good Food Purchasing Program, which was a policy that was developed by the Good Food Procurement Working Group. This is known nationally as one of the most holistic, metric-based food procurement policies in the country. It targets major institutions and asks them to commit to sourcing a certain percentage of their food to meet the 5 core values of local economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce, animal welfare, and nutrition. It's similar to LEED certification in that there's a tiered system where institutions can meet either a baseline level or move up, but essentially they're expected to meet a baseline across all 5 different issue areas. And I think the beauty of this policy is because of the working group model, where we bring stakeholders with expertise in many different issue areas, we were able to develop something that goes beyond, local, or goes beyond nutrition and creates a policy that brings everyone's issue together in one place. So this was adopted by the City of Los Angeles in 2012, and the Los Angeles Unified School District a few weeks later. LAUSD is the largest food buyer in the City of Los Angeles. And so together we're working with about 7 institutions, and this impacts about 750,000 meals a day. And the idea is to use the power of these major food buyers to influence the supply chain. And through LAUSD, we've actually seen some pretty significant impacts. So in 2011, LAUSD, after the task force report on the Good Food for All agenda was released, LAUSD wanted to commit to buying more food locally. Since this point, they have gone from, they were spending about 9% of their produce budget on local produce, and that has shifted to over 70% now. They've redirected about $12 million in their produce spend towards local farms in our 200-mile region. And now about 50% of their $125 million food budget is coming from the local economy. So our staff has done quite a bit of detailed research to verify that, where the food is coming from and scored according to our metrics. And I think what has been really kind of remarkable is that the suppliers are responding to what this market signal is telling them. So their produce supplier is also their grain supplier. And what the grain vendor has done is told all of the farmers in its supply chain that it will only accept 100% sustainable California-grown wheat. And so what that has meant is that these farms now have to adhere to these certain farming practices in terms of water conservation and air quality management, workplace and worker rights. This is one of, very few policies that even mention the word workers. The LA Times reported that based on LAUSD's purchases, they've created about 150 jobs in processing and manufacturing. And then there was a recent story in the LA Times about an alliance of 31 small growers in the San Bernardino area who are fighting off an invasive disease that is impacting their citrus crops. And so now, because of the commitment from LAUSD and other school districts around Southern California, they're able to diversify with the understanding that they do have buyers who are willing to support different crops. And so it's creating more stability in their business models. The other program that we are running is the Community Market Conversion Program that was adopted when the Community Redevelopment Agency was dissolved. This was a program of the CRA, and it was something like what we do is we try to fill gaps when we need to. So whether or not the Food Policy Council is the appropriate vehicle to actually be running a community market conversion program that works with individual stores in underserved neighborhoods to transform the store environment to promoting healthier food options, and doing this in a way that is supportive and sustainable of the business owner. Whether or not we're the appropriate body to be doing it, we wanted to make sure that this program continued. It was a very important program, and so we've been working with a large network of stakeholders to continue the work here. And actually, we have a grand reopening of one of the stores. It's at 60th and Vermont this Saturday. It's a fantastic, the store owner is just a tremendous community leader. He's financed the project entirely by himself. He got a Kiva loan, which was the seed funding, but all of the work is really happening. He's financing the work. He has a vision for what he wants. It's a beautiful new store. And it went from Dollar Warehouse to Alba Snacks and Services, and I encourage everyone to come. It's a big block party. But essentially what we've noticed is that there are thousands of these small stores across Los Angeles. And there are also many of these community market conversion programs or corner store conversion programs that are happening all over the county. There are funders are throwing money at these projects, and I shouldn't say they're throwing money at them, but there are a lot of projects starting, but I think one of the challenges that these projects have faced is that this model needs to be economically sustainable for the business owners. So what we developed through our working group model was the development of business development and leadership trainings for small store owners so that they could start making small strides into transforming their food environment on their own. We had 4 trainings last year. They're multilingual, Korean, Spanish, and English, and we've had about 200 small store owners participate in these trainings. And we leverage the expertise of our network, so we have people talking about how to sell produce at a profit, how to, accounting and bookkeeping, how to get CalFresh in, and how to, use product placement to bring up the healthier items to the front of the store, doing so at a profit, and creating, I guess, a disincentive for people to buy some of the typical corner store items. So these trainings have been very successful, and I think are a great resource, not only to the store owners, but also to nonprofits who are running some of the corner store conversion programs to be connected to just a range of resources and experts. Then quickly, I'll just go through our working groups. Our urban agriculture working group has been, I think it's an always growing number of people and organizations who are there's a thriving urban agricultural movement here in Los Angeles, and there are many initiatives underway. Some of the priorities, the working group over the past year, I'm sure many of you saw Ron Finley's Guerrilla Gardener TED Talk, where he was talking about planting edible fruits and vegetables in the parkways. So that was a policy that was brought to City Council, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and finally the policy was passed through a lot of meetings and advocacy efforts by a lot of different people. It was passed this past fall. The group is now working on a policy related to reduced water rates for edibles in affordable housing developments and school gardens and nonprofits. There are efforts underway to implement the statewide bill AB 551 at the local level. Then there is quite a bit of work happening around food waste and composting in the city of LA. The Street Food Working Group is actually another success story of ours. This started as a working group of the LA Food Policy Council, bringing together people who were concerned with the fact that street food vending in the city of LA was illegal. And so it brought a range of stakeholders together. Through that process, real leadership emerged, and now there is a coalition being run by East LA Community Corporation and Learn, and they are working. There was a motion introduced in the city of LA in the fall that is working towards an ordinance to legalize street vending in the city of LA and create a path for healthy food incentives for vendors who will be permitted in the city. So the idea is to really, foster entrepreneurship among street vendors, but to also recognize that street food vending could be a critical healthy food access strategy. Our Healthy Food Retail Group was working on the trainings initially. Now they've developed a suite of policy recommendations that are targeted at the city's Economic and Workforce Development Department related to creating a business case or economic development case for healthy food retail and other food industry sectors. And then we have a Sustainable Seafood Working Group that just had a big event at Loyola Marymount University, a panel discussion related to sustainable seafood and aquaculture and what some of the misconceptions are around what we should be eating, what we shouldn't be eating, and the state of our hatcheries and state of seafood in the U.S. A Farmers Market for All Working Group, their focus is really on ensuring that farmers markets are accessible to all residents and affordable to them. So it's about making it easier for residents to use CalFresh and public benefits at farmers markets, and to get the word out that these markets do accept public benefits. So this work is being driven through LA County Department of Public Health. They're coordinating with LA County Department of Public Social Services and many nonprofits who are leading the way around farmers market initiatives. And then finally, we have a Good Food Economy Working Group that's more of a networking space to talk about issues related to distribution challenges and also labor issues. And then finally, we have our network space, which we meet every other month. We have, we get about between 100 and 150 people at every meeting, and it's just the who's who of food policy and food activism in Los Angeles. It's a really neat space because you'll meet anyone, you'll meet the head of a huge food company or a student activist who, or a backyard gardener who just is, passionate about what they do. So it's a great place to network, meet people, make connections, and also to learn. So each time we have some type of a focused issue area that we discuss. We hear about new research, get updates from our working groups. April 17th is our next network meeting. We'll be talking about food and social enterprise. And then we have meetings in June and August. We also have a Facebook and Twitter handle, our website with lots of materials. It's kind of, an information hub on any food issues. You can sign our pledge, Good Food Pledge, on our website. And there is my email address as well. So that's the Food Policy Council in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, happy to take them.
I went to one of the last remaining agricultural schools in Southern California at Pomona. Some of the last remaining agricultural land in the county as well. And the expansion of agricultural land is really tricky and it's really hard, but we have some interesting opportunities I think that Alexis brings, highlights for us. Particularly through, I think, the use of unused space. This idea of alleyways and people's backyards becoming productive agricultural space is really interesting to me. I think it's something you should all be thinking about, and whether or not that requires policy intervention. Do we need to rezone some of these communities? Do we need to rethink what agricultural land use is all about? It's something to think about. If we want to start scaling this up into at a community scale, so that people aren't just doing it in their backyards, but they might be doing it on some of these vacant lots we hear about in the city, do those places go from being residentially zoned to being zoned A1? I think that's a really important question, and what impact does that have? Might that be where we allow reduced water rates rather than just letting water rates, which are the lowest in the whole world practically here in Southern California? Do we need a way to sort of make that more measurable? I worry, I think that, as Alexis pointed out, we do steal almost all of our water here in Southern California. It comes from up north in the Colorado. And as someone who has done some of my own backyard gardening, I worry about what I call the brown thumb phenomena, which is people who like to think that they can garden and they waste a lot of resources in their backyard to get one tomato. That's a problem for all of us, I think. I mean, that's not good that they've spent the whole summer using water that might be needed for a lot of other purposes to create just a small amount of vegetables and fruit for themselves. I read an interesting report from December 2013 that said that places like LAUSD and some of these larger organizations are really challenged because of equipment. And I wondered, Alexis, if you have any experience with that sort of transformation in some of these locations? Are you trying to help them transform the way they create food using fresh food versus packaged, and what kind of challenges you see there? You might talk about that for a minute. I'll pose a few questions and maybe you can answer after I'm done. I also like this idea that you're working for everyone, but I think that there is also in your work a large piece of social equity. And so how do you balance being available for everyone, but also focusing on what I would call health disparity? Most of my work really is looking at trying to level the playing field of health. And so, although we have well-off white communities that are doing really well health-wise, giving them resources is important, but also understanding that more resources may need to go somewhere else is a challenge, I'm sure, especially politically in this county. I think that becomes an interesting question for you to maybe think about. I also was sort of intrigued by this idea of school vendors. A lot of my work involves going out into the community and photographing neighborhoods, and what I found when I would go into many of these lower income communities would be the mothers of the school children selling unhealthy snacks out the back of their car. And while there would also be the man up the street selling the nice sliced fruit, there were also these people who would come up and park right next to that person and sell sort of what just seemed like a really bad thing to kids. And so are you engaging those folks at all to think about what the repercussions are to their actions? We're doing a lot of work around farmers markets. I'm in a research project right now with Allison, who's in the room. I don't think any of our other classmates are in the room. Looking at also the sort of layout of farmers markets and where they appear and what's available in them. I'd be interested to know if your organization is looking at food availability in specific communities in markets. We've been finding that a lot of markets are 50%, as much as 50% not food. They tend to sell gifts, clothing, candles, and so are you working with groups to sort of think about what that might also mean, and are there disparities there as well?
The farmers market managers, who I think are most diligent in ensuring that the farmers are legitimate farmers, are probably in more affluent communities. And so there is definitely an equity issue when the communities that are least able to afford produce are going to a farmer's market and buying the produce thinking that they're doing the best thing for their family and spending more, but they're buying the same produce for a higher price at the farmer's market that they would get at the grocery store. And so that's a huge issue, regulated by the county agricultural commissioner. Like every government agency is underfunded, and so that's a big issue. Partners of ours are looking at the issues of what's being sold and the quality of food. It's not something we necessarily are focused on, but it's absolutely an equity issue. The times of farmers markets, the oversaturation in some neighborhoods of farmers markets. I mean, there are many issues related to farmers markets. You think it seems like this great concept on the surface, and then you dig deeper, and the problems pervade. Balancing, so school vendors, okay, that one is interesting as well, because it's my understanding that there is already a policy regulating the distance with which school vendors or street vendors are restricted from being within, I think, 500 feet or something of a school. There's no regulation. Our position has been that right now we have about 10,000 street vendors in the city of LA, and it is all unregulated. And so by creating this mechanism to actually regulate the industry, there are better checks and balances in terms of getting a business permit, connecting those vendors with Department of Public Health, the Environmental Health Division, so that we can ensure that the food safety is up to speed. There's no revenue through permit fees to actually enforce a policy, so the hope is that this will bring in more dollars to actually give to the enforcement agency to make sure that there will be a mechanism, there will be a provision that restricts access around schools or gives preference to street vendors that are only selling fruit. LAUSD is, and I unfortunately can't speak to other school districts. I know they're light years ahead. Well, some school districts are light years ahead in terms of integrating scratch cooking back into the cafeterias. LAUSD is working on this concept. Right now they have the Newman Nutrition Center, which is their central kitchen, and they produce about 150,000 meals a day there. It's big assembly line. Their goal is to close the central kitchen in the next several years. Wow. So they've been working with Department of Public Health and some other partners like the California Food Policy Advocates to begin reintegrating scratch cooking in the schools that actually have kitchens. I mean, many of the schools don't have kitchens, so it's massive. I mean, we're talking about, what is it, like close to 800 schools.
The report I read said 88% of schools in the country have no idea how to convert from their old form of cooking into a new form of cooking. So it's a big problem. I mean, imagine a small district. LAUSD at least gets a lot of money. I went to a school of 100 people. That school, I can only imagine, is still cooking whatever they get in a can that gets shipped from wherever. And I grew up in an agricultural community.
Right. School food advocates and school food service directors who are working with unions. Traditionally they've been the adversaries, but some of the food service unions, they see job potential in more scratch cooking. And so there have been some partnerships forged between the school districts, the unions, the advocates to finance more kitchens and to integrate, scratch cooking quotas into bargaining contracts, and you know, it's kind of neat to see the new partnerships forming. So there's a huge movement towards it, but yeah, I mean, it's years away from happening. But people are beginning to think about the use of space much more in terms of, you know, looking at all sorts of kitchens that are underutilized, and how you can use that either for the community or for business opportunities or what. And then in terms of balancing resources, I think that's it. I mean, from the beginning, this has been an initiative that's focused on building a more equitable food system, and so often that does mean that, you know, the communities that have access to the best food are actually, you know, not going to get many resources put towards them. So one of the areas where I've seen it is with our Good Food Purchasing Pledge. You know, we are always asked about, can restaurants sign the pledge? Can we, you know, get this corporate cafeteria to sign on? But our focus is really on public and nonprofit institutions because, you know, they are serving huge numbers of high-need populations. So we want to improve the nutritional quality of the food in those institutions, and we don't have the capacity to, as much as we want to work with everyone, you know, we have to focus our resources where they're most needed. And, you know, obviously the same is true with, actually one area where we've seen some of that tension surface is related to urban agriculture, because every community, there are activists in every, you know, neighborhood of Los Angeles. And so I think that's something we have to continually reinforce, is that this is about creating a more equitable food system, because some of the most active communities in Los Angeles are, you know, on the west side and not always thinking through an equity lens. But then again, most of our policies that we've worked on helping to advance are at the city level. So as long as we see it as strategic for helping, you know, all communities will work to advance it. But there's always a tension there. We did quite a bit of vetting of our policy before we brought it before. I don't think I mentioned that it was signed as an executive directive by the mayor. So we had to be very careful that there wasn't going to be really serious opposition. We shared it with the business community. It was primarily produce distributors. They loved it. I don't know why everyone loved it as much as they did, because, you know, if you read the policy, there are some very controversial statements in it. So I wasn't it was basically unanimous support across every issue area. But in the case of LAUSD, we did not ask them to make any changes with their current vendors. So they have, you know, they're working with some very, very big vendors right now with their meat suppliers. So those contracts are up to bid in about a year or two, and I imagine there will be changes made. And it may be, you know, we may have some not influence in it, but maybe the work that we're doing is somewhat of a factor. Maybe it's totally unrelated to this policy, but yeah, I think there will be changes. So there could be opposition. I think, you know, it was sort of a gentle entry point because we weren't asking for major changes to be made. But I think just naturally changes will occur, and that may be where we start encountering some opposition.
The produce is grown in the state, is shipped out of the state, and then goes to distributors and then shipped back in. With your purchasing pledge, were you able to circumvent any of that? Like, were you able to, or did you have anything to do with actually distributing the product to the people who've signed on to the pledge?
We ask our institution to work with their food service provider. So in the cases of some of the city departments, they work with food service providers like Aramark or Sodexo or Morrison. Then that entity, that provider, has to get data from their produce distributors and their meat suppliers to verify where the food is coming from. So many of the, particularly the produce distributors, are able, they have some type of a tracking system, and this is becoming more and more prevalent now that there are some pretty serious changes to the food safety laws at the federal level that require traceability, because right now it's kind of a free-for-all in terms of knowing where our food is coming from. But we have worked with distributors who have a tracking system in place that can show us which farms the produce is coming from, which plants the meat is coming from. And so what the food service, the institution and the food service provider have done with the distributor has said, okay, in these months we want to get all of the seasonal ingredients from farms in this area. And the goal, I mean, we've been working with them for about a year now, so the goal is to begin changing menus as well to help provide support to the institution to begin changing their menu to offer more seasonal ingredients that align and to walk their customers through why they're making the changes to the menus that they are. And so there will be more and more shifts. Right now it's kind of early on to say what kind of shifts are happening, but in the case of the LAUSD, it was basically just telling their distributor, we need you to make sure we buy at least 50% of our produce from the region, and they were able to get to 72%.
I'm a citizen activist in Jefferson Park, which is a foothold between Mid-City and South LA. And we have a proposal that we're putting forth to get nutritionally dense food to the neighborhood, as well as employ people from the neighborhood. But one of the issues that we see in South Los Angeles is a very high rate of poverty. And one of the reasons people consume the food that they consume, especially single parents, you know, who are often very young, under 30, you know, have 2 or 3 kids, is they don't have the buying power. So we want a public-private partnership with state, city. Is there a place to intersect the public and the private money, or do we have to make a decision between it's all private and we don't need Kasha and Light Kitchen, or it's all public?
No, I don't think you need to decide that. I mean, the way we're structured, we're fiscally sponsored, and we have foundation funding from, you know, some of the traditional foundations, as well as we have a small grant from the city, and we've been able, I mean, that's the way. We have not really accepted, we've accepted a small amount of corporate funding. I think that is where, with our board, there would be many more conversations, but structurally it's, yeah, I mean, if you're a nonprofit or however you decide, I think there's no issue. The 2 areas that our board was most focused on were related to there was no mention of anti-poverty strategies, and also there was no mention of restricting unhealthy food options. So I'd encourage everyone to look at that. And then also the city is updating their zoning code. And it's, I guess, apparently the oldest zoning code in the country. I mean, maybe that's something to talk about with your school, is how to approach that, because I think we have a few planners involved. One of the planning commissioners is a new board member of ours, but even she's kind of at a loss of where to even begin with really digging into that and knowing how to even tackle it. And then the mobility plan is being updated as well at the same time. The city and the school district are required to give their leftover food to a nonprofit who can accept it. Then I saw that Trader Joe's has that policy instituted as well. I'm not that familiar with the policies that the big dining halls have. NRDC has been doing some really amazing work related to food waste and just starting that conversation. The city is undergoing a massive, I think it's coming to the city council next week, it's a massive overhaul of their waste hauler franchise agreement. And there is a component, I mean, it's not really addressing the waste piece, but it's addressing, there will be some composting language in there, and hopefully working towards becoming more efficient or having a better recognition of how much food needs to be produced or cooked to curtail some of the waste, because it's, I mean, horrifying. Yeah. As far as I know, efforts are still underway, but there's yet to be an actual food hub in the city or the county of LA that I guess meets the definition of, you know, it's like an aggregation and distribution system with a mission. But I think there are different iterations forming. The LA Kitchen may be one model that is the closest thing to it so far. They're breaking ground soon, and what they're doing actually related to food waste is developing partnerships with growers in the area to take their surplus food. They have a kitchen, a processing facility. They will have a processing facility that provides job training to recently released inmates, and the food that is prepared on site will go to seniors through the senior meal program. So it's a very holistic program. It's the founder of DC Central Kitchen has moved to LA to start that. But otherwise, our effort, I'm not sure what's happening in South LA. I know Community Health Councils has been doing some work around it. And then in the Northeast LA area, the LA River Revitalization Corporation and Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental have been working on a feasibility study as well. So.
I think our time is up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.